Thank you, Joey, and welcome everybody to the work session for Tuesday, May the 27th. We're going to start out by calling the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Alderman Blanton, she's here somewhere. Alderman Caesar.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
And Alderman Brown and Alderman Potts are absent, and Alderman Baggett.
Present.
Okay, and the mayor's here also. We now have an opportunity for citizens to make comments for items they wish to comment on, and I have no speaker cards. We'll continue to move forward. We'll go to items number 1, which is the Mercy Community Healthcare Franklin Classic. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the Christmas parade sponsored by Downtown Franklin Rotary. I see we have an elf in the audience. Any questions on that one? And then lastly, a liquor license for West Main Street Liquors, Jody Beard, owner, managing agent, 1326 West Main Street. That's getting pretty close, I hope. So, is that close to us?
What's that?
1326?
Yeah.
Good.
Great.
Just checking. Okay, any questions on that one? Okay, we'll now go to FY26 proposed budget update, and I'll toss it to Mr. Stuckey and to Michael Walters Young.
Good evening. We have probably about an hour set aside on this work session, should you need it, to talk through our proposed fiscal 26 budget. This is a unique budget in that there's been a number of moving targets associated with it. We just recently received our certified rate for our updated property tax rate based on the reappraisal that is taking place, a cycle that happens every 4 years in Williamson County. So that impacted a new equalized rate that we're working from and that we propose as part of this budget. You'll have a first reading on the budget tonight, and then on June 10th, you'll have a public hearing and second reading, and that's really, these next 2 meetings are really where we need to set in where you want that property tax rate to be. And based on the dialogue with the Budget and Finance Committee, we brought forward an ordinance establishing that tax rate with 2 different options for you. So I'm going to walk through a truncated version of our budget presentation with the different components we have here. We'll go on to the next slide. The overall budget for all funds is $243.3 million. That's actually about a 2.7% decrease over the amended budget that you will see tonight at voting session. The general fund itself, with the proposed city administrator's proposed tax rate, is at $128.1 million, and that is a 9.7% increase, 6% of which is related to the dedicated property tax rate, and the components are related specifically to capital investments. So moving on, these are just some high-level highlights that talk about the budget itself as proposed. It's a balanced budget structurally in terms of ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses being in balance. It fully complies with your policies related to debt and fund balance, fund reserve. Essential services are both maintained and enhanced across the organization. And we have, with the reappraised rate, an updated property tax rate and a dedicated component, what we're calling Invest Franklin 2.0. You may remember 9 years ago, we implemented an Invest Franklin initiative that had dedicated funding for infrastructure for our capital investment program. And this dedicates another component of that in this budget. And even with that, the property tax rates you're considering put us at the lowest, among the lowest in the state of Tennessee and nationally. So a couple other components to touch on. This reappraisal moved our total assessed tax base from $7.6 billion to $10.75 billion, a significant increase. And with that, a penny of property tax, which today generates $750,000 per cent of property tax, now and the reappraisal will generate just over $1 million per penny. So with that, the current rate, which is 32.61 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, moves down to $23.10, 23.1 cents, excuse me. So what that means is we take the reappraised values and adjust the rate so that it generates the same amount of total revenue. And that's why the rate comes down approximately 9.5 cents. So specifically, Invest Franklin 2.0 dedicates property tax capacity for critical infrastructure needs and enhancing service over multiple years, services of the city over multiple years sustained. It provides funding for the partnership with TDOT to deliver the widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, Mac Hatcher Southeast. We were able to confirm with TDOT at this stage their funding and their 10-year plan still has a $25 million deficit from the total amount needed. We've pledged $50 million to it. They've put $25 million. The remaining $25 million still needs to be identified from that partnership with the state of Tennessee. We know they will come back at that next year in terms of looking at partnerships. And so we'll continue to work on that. We'll also look at opportunities for additional funds through the MPO and the regional allocation of funds that also directs some federal dollars. It also can be a significant help in us addressing other capital investment needs as you update the 10-year capital plan. It will be critical in providing support for additional service needs driven by our community's growth and different community needs. In this budget alone, you've got 8 new positions, 7 of which are related to public safety. And that includes 3 police officers for patrol, 3 on-shift firefighters, and a victim counselor in the police department. And then your last position is an IT system development position. So that's your 8 positions, and that Invest Franklin 2.0 makes that possible in terms of adding that additional staffing. So again, when we look back at the original Invest Franklin, it provided a backbone for what became our 10-year capital plan that today is in excess of $500 million. It's not the only funding source, obviously, but having that dedicated component really made it possible for us to develop long-term plans, look at partnership opportunities, be it grant dollars, others, to help us deliver key projects. And within that 10-year plan, well over 70% of those projects relate directly to transportation needs, improving our roadways. So here's what's proposed in my recommended budget to you. It is to establish an updated property tax rate of 32 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So that breaks down into 3 components. The 23.1 cents is really the updated rate for existing operations and existing capital project support. That's your existing funding today. And then the next 2 components, it takes 6.8 cents and dedicates it to the funding of Invest Franklin 2.0. And that is specifically the Mac Hatcher Southeast widening and other capital investments that we will be able to identify. Specifically if you looked at dedicating that to a 20-year debt service, that's about $100 million of capacity. What we learned in our first version of Invest Franklin, that's a baseline. You'll likely be able to leverage that into more as you look at timing, you look at leveraging grant opportunities, you look at other ways to partner with development-related projects that add capacity. So I think of that as a baseline, but also helps us meet our funding commitment to Mac Hatcher Southeast and has capacity available to offer to partner on the widening of Mac Hatcher Northwest as the state continues to consider on a regular basis additional partnership opportunities. And then the balance of that property tax, just over 2 cents, would be dedicated to upgrades in city operations, specifically staffing and for service delivery and service needs. The other component from a revenue generation standpoint is to increase our hotel occupancy tax from where it is today at 4% to the permissive authority granted by the state of Tennessee to Franklin, which is to go up to 5%. So we would make that adjustment. That's somewhere between $1.2 and $1.3 million a year of additional revenue capacity. Consistent with what the board's guidance has been, we're assuming that goes to supporting parks projects and other improvements that have positive impacts on our tourism product and on that aspect of our local economy. So let's talk through just the process that we're in. I referenced it a little bit in my opening remarks, but our first reading is tonight. We've written an ordinance. It has the two options, the proposed 32 cents and then a second option of 29 cents. And that's up for first reading tonight. Then your public hearing and your second reading to establish that rate is at your next meeting on June 10th. To the extent we can get the direction where you want to go tonight, that would be great, because that helps us make sure it's clear in terms of publishing and talking about that public hearing where your proposed rate is. Second reading would be June 10th. You have a specific action you need to take that you are certifying that you're going beyond that updated certified rate. So there are two actions associated with establishing your rate. Anything above 23.1 cents will need that action. And then finally, your third and final reading would be your second meeting in June, on June 24th. So we stand ready to work with you in terms of if you need additional time or how you want to work through consideration and giving the direction you need for the fiscal 26 budget. This last chart is one that the Budget and Finance Committee used in sort of considering these options. And this lays out the two options, what I have recommended, the 32 cents that I broke down for you in the previous discussion. And then knowing that the specific component, we had originally put this capacity out there thinking about the potential of partnering on Mac Hatcher Northwest, and that's around a 3 cent component. So netting that out brought you down to around 29 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, and that included 3.4 cents of capacity dedicated to our partnership and capital investment component, and then the balance, just 2.5 cents towards overall operations. So you look at what that generates. To put the 32 cents in another additional context for you. If you look at what that does to additional property tax paid by our citizens, for the owner of a $1.1 million home, that 32 cent tax rate, that additional capacity over what's being paid today is essentially 63 cents per day. It's a little over 200 some dollars a year, but it is 63 cents a day for the owner of a $1.1 million home, just to give you that in terms of context and that dedicated component and what that can deliver in terms of capacity and improvements in our infrastructure. All right, so just in summary, I believe that we've provided you with a budget that meets your goals, is in compliance, but also positions the city over the long term to invest in our infrastructure, invest in service delivery, and keep us at that highly competitive position that Franklin has enjoyed for many years. It continues to support our capital investment program, and we end this projected year well above your policy levels for reserves. You're in a strong position that does protect us against any economic downturns and any other concerns, and also provides a significant piece of pay-as-you-go or cash funding for capital investment projects. So that gives you sort of a broad overview. There's obviously a lot more slides, and there's 458 pages of budget document that we can delve into if you'd like, but I'll stop there and take any questions. And Michael's with us, he and his team and folks across the whole department, or the whole city and various departments have worked diligently to go through information, provide background, provide key measures about not just what we spend, but what we deliver and how we serve. And we're proud to present this budget for you and answer any questions you have.
Alderman Bland.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say I know we had to do a big shift very quickly just because of some changes of information, and thank you all for what you've done, and it's a great budget you've put together that I think keeps us where we need to be and a little bit extra. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Anybody else? Alderman Berger.
I was looking at the two options, and If the second option was chosen, what would we lose out on? Can you pinpoint it?
You've got specific capacity that you will not be folding into your capital investment program. What I look at is your ability to both meet the known, but also have capacity to plan for an updated 10-year capital plan. And having that capacity both puts us at the ready to meet the partnership opportunity with Mac Hatcher Northwest. We've still got a $25 million hole in Mac Hatcher Southeast. And then there's other opportunities that we talked about just a meeting or so ago when we looked at the capital investment program. We're looking at ways to possibly improve Franklin Road, Carruthers. There may be some options to do at least some spot improvements on Mac Hatcher Northwest that bring at least a little bit of short-term relief. So those are all things that we're continuing to work on. Having that capacity both helps us address those with those projects, but also do some longer term planning and address a number of the projects that right now fall outside of the funding zone. So it gives you another chance to do more. And we know that there are many needs across the community, and it doesn't get you all the way there, but it does do a lot to help us address a number of capital investment needs.
Okay, and I've had some constituents ask me about if we're going to raise property tax, why not put it all into infrastructure and roads? That is the number one worry in this town.
Yeah.
And not divide it up. And that's number one question, if you would speak to that. And number two is, once this goes into effect, are we sure that we don't move funds and that we dedicate it to what we're saying we're dedicating it to? And how are we beholden to that?
Well,
Can you speak to both of those?
yeah, sure. The operating component is we haven't touched operations in 9 years. We've seen growth. We have needs. This specifically goes into public safety. More than half of that capacity in year one is dedicated to adding police officers on patrol and on-shift firefighters specifically. So you will also have significant staffing needs in the next couple years as you bring new parks on board. We're adding, fully functional Bicentennial Park. Later this year, you'll add Pearl Bransford Park in another couple years. And so looking ahead, this provides the capacity to meet staffing needs both now and down the line. And it's just a couple cents towards that. In terms of the funding capacity, that dedicated component of property tax goes directly into the funding model and considerations that we do to support the 10-year capital plan. And so that would be both what we can support additional debt service with, but also what can we are able to do with pay-as-you-go or cash resources. That 10-year CIP, as you look at it today, is somewhere around 60% paid with cash, around 40% paid with debt. We would be somewhere in that range, probably no more than a 50-50 split at any given time. But it's really balancing all those needs and giving you capacity to meet more long-term needs, and also setting a rate that you're going to live with over a significant period of time. That's essentially what we did with Invest Franklin 9 years ago. We set that rate. We've lived with it. We've been able to enhance significantly our capacity in terms of projects and funding capacity. And so this would do much the same with knowing that we've got at least one large partnership project on the horizon with TDOT and the potential to do more.
What time period would you say that would be? You said over a significant time period. Are we talking 5-6 years?
Well, all I can tell you is what we did last time, and we lived with that rate for 9 years. So, we don't know what else comes our way, what other
Right.
needs we're going to balance, but that's
The
what we
history
did.
shows that.
Yeah, that's what we did the last time we did a dedicated funding source in a similar circumstance. It allowed us to move from a 5-year capital plan to a 10-year plan that also, as it stands today, is focusing on delivering over $500 million of project needs over the 10-year window. This isn't the only funding source. There are many others, but it is sort of the backbone of that program.
And the other conversations that we've been having, I'm sure other people have had this with your constituents and people in our town. With all the growth that's happening here and all the people moving in, why would we need to raise property taxes? Can't not this growth end up paying for itself? And we said, hey, my conversation is always growth never pays for itself. It helps pay for it, but never does. So with that, Eric, would you speak to the fact that growth is paying for what
Yeah.
right now? What is the growth paying for? And on top of that, what is it not paying for that we will see in this raise in property tax if that happens?
Well, it's a balancing, and the fact that your 10-year capital investment plan has somewhere around 60% of cash resources, a significant component of that is because we gather funds in the impact fee area for parks, roads, water, sewer, all those components come through and help us deliver projects. And that's a cash resource.
Yeah.
So that cash funding, a significant portion of that is because we have the most developed impact fee structure in the state of Tennessee. And we work to keep that updated and reflective of the cost that it takes and for development to at least pay its fair share in terms of the impact it's putting on expanded infrastructure. So this is part of balancing that. Partnership opportunities come around. This gives us the ability to do that. We'd rather not have to dedicate as much towards that, but that's the reality. That's what it's going to cost to get projects addressed on the state network. And so this sort of reflects that reality. We don't have as much of the ability to draw on those and put those towards those types of projects as well. So this is balancing what you need to deliver on projects in the 10-year CIP window, as well as recognizing we have cash resources from where we assign costs to development.
So would it be a fair statement to say that growth has really helped us to stay abreast of the challenges of staffing, pretty much staffing and services to police, fire, trash, and then we get to a limit where all those are funding that, but yet if we're looking at the 10-year projects of the capital investment projects and the road projects, the infrastructure that people are asking us to be more aggressive on, we can do a certain amount, but in order to be aggressive on that and get to the point where we need to be,
Yeah.
that they're asking us to be, that's why you've proposed this.
You really need a strategy that is all of the above in terms of assigning costs to development and putting it into your CIP,
Yeah.
but also saying where do we step up and match dedicated property tax resources, again, within the context of one of the lowest, if not the lowest, property tax rate in the state of Tennessee for a city 50,000 or greater. So that's kind of the balancing act we try to strike here, but it's really important. Those impact fees don't help pay for operations. They help pay for capital investments and infrastructure improvements. So we've got to bear that and have largely borne that through our general fund budget. This does provide a little bit of help. Not a huge amount, but a little bit of help in terms of meeting needs today and in the future.
I would just say one more comment. It's the fact that, when I'm talking to people, it's not, the tax rate to me is irrelevant. It's what you're going to write your check for. And that's where the people are looking at this. And I'm going to vote for this when we get to voting session tonight because I want to get to public comment. Because I think we need to hear more about this and we need to look at the two options and say what we are hoping to accomplish with those options, option A and B. And I think we also have to figure out where it's going to carry us to. How far do you think it will carry us? Of course, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's happening. But I do think we're fiscally conservative. We manage our money quite well. And we've always been very responsible, and our debt is fairly low. We pay our debt. We pay aggressively on the debt. We don't foolishly spend, and so there's a lot of moving parts to this thing. But it is what the people end up writing their checks for. So it's a tough one sometimes because I'm not a person that wants to easily raise taxes at all. I'm not sure that any of us do, but. I appreciate those explanations, Eric, because I think people at home are watching the Bowman meetings need to hear that and hear the explanations because there's a lot to it. Michael Walters, do you have anything to add to that he had any Words of brilliance here? Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate the weigh-in.
Alderman Baggett.
Thank you. So, I think this is we're hearing this in the community. A lot of different cities, municipalities, and the county are having the same conversations, and I'm really pleased that the city of Franklin is having a bit of a different conversation. We're not having to crawl out of an underfunded situation or a situation where we don't have a choice. We actually have the luxury of being able to choose to do something more than, frankly, we are required to do, or traditionally been required to do, which is pay for state roads, or part of it. You've got other municipalities that have some really serious issues and have hard decisions, in the county as well. So I think that's an extra layer of responsibility for us to make sure that we're doing this, and we're doing it, and it's going to what the people want. How many, there'll be comments, I'm sure, in the community about, well, City Hall, this and all this, it's a visible project that is one of our most visible projects. I think people would be interested to know that in the southeast, between an overpass, and y'all, this is my greatest hits, but an overpass that is going to have 6,000 cars that drive over it within the next 15 years. We just spent $40 million on it, 40% of almost the cost of sticks and bricks, about $18 million less. A $60 million park. City Hall, when you look at our total of capital projects, is not the biggest piece of the pie by any stretch. It is not motivating this by any stretch. In fact, we can honestly continue on without this change and fund how many millions of dollars of capital projects?
Over 500 million.
Over 500 million in capital projects over the next 10 years. And do so by paying 66% in cash on most of them. Now, rewind that on the Facebook and listen to that again. We have $500 million in capital projects in the next 10 years. We're paying for 66% of most of those in cash. We don't have to do this. What we do have to do is get Mac Hatcher Southeast built and Northwest built. And I'm a little miffed that Northwest was not included on this. The people of West Franklin know that's a problem. And it's going to be our job to make sure that the state of Tennessee knows that it's a problem. And I know staff has done a great job doing that so far. So this is a fundamental paradigm shift that happened where we now are being asked to pay for 50% of state roads. And if we didn't, we'd be waiting 15 years, 10 years plus to get those roads done. Again, you all have heard this, but again, this is an important meeting. I want to make sure that is on the record, that the public hears that. That's why we're looking at this. Not because we're in a pinch. It's not the case. Not because we're building a new city hall. It's not why we're doing this. It's because the state of Tennessee said that if you want to get Mac Hatcher done, you're going to have to pony up $100 million for both sections. And our tax rates did not contemplate that. They have not contemplated that. The tax rates Alderman Peterson and Barnhill have put in place, and Mayor Moore and Alderman Blanton, they did not contemplate a $100 million surprise. And that's what we got. So I appreciate that we're in this position. I'm more inclined, you said something, you said I thought we had the full Southeast 50%. We don't have the 50%.
We do not. We clarified that with the state of Tennessee last week. The $25 million that they had in the original version of the 10-year plan. What happened is they had the original version of the 10-year plan we saw a month or so ago. And then a couple weeks ago, they added additional funds that had been in the approved state budget that the governor had recommended. That rippled through their plan. They added no more partnership projects, and we were unclear whether they met the remaining $25 million that was still hanging out there on Southeast, and we confirmed last week that they have not yet. So that's still an open missing component in that project funding. We will go with them and look at our opportunity to secure some federal dollars through the MPO process. But right now it still stands there. They have indicated they're going to do another round of partnership project consideration next year. That may be an opportunity as well. but it is an unknown right now. That there's a $25 million gap in funding that project right now. We want to also be prepared to move it up sooner into the project delivery mode. So we're looking at our ability to do some early environmental work, or even some elements of the design work that can make it kind of shovel ready, should that opportunity comes up too. So there's two components on bringing Southeast up sooner, but also there's that remaining 25 million in the funding plan.
Well, that's unfortunate.
It is.
We really, I could start preaching. I've already done a little bit so far, but if all the municipalities in the state took the approach we're taking, we wouldn't have the backlog of state road issues. And we're trying to lead the way and show that it can be done, and it needs to be rewarded with the projects. The citizens deserve that if they're putting their money out there, additional money. Anyway, back to the topic at hand, which is option 1 or 2. I really think that without the Northwest Bridge being included, I just hesitate to go ahead and add that 3.5 cents until we know for certain. I think we've talked about this going towards those Mac-Hatcher projects, and we've changed the terminology, and understandably so, to be now kind of going into the CIP kitty, which is fine. But I would be willing to make that kind of investment or even more. And quite frankly, this is a function of just the timing that we had. I think Invest Franklin 1.0, there was a list of projects that was very specific associated with that tax change. And so the citizens could see that specific set of projects, and this is what was going for. In this case, because of the timing, frankly, and because we had to put something in there for both of those Mac-Hatcher projects, I'm more inclined to not add the Northwest piece in there, and also not add it without having that highlighted, like, hey, citizens, here's where this 3.5 cents is going to go towards these projects specifically. Now, do I think that the staff and this board, mayor and alderman, would put that monies towards the CIP projects? Of course, I do. I don't doubt that existing board. We've got elections in the fall. I just would hesitate to do that. I would rather look at it next budget year with a set of projects, and not even ruling out that there could be more than that if those specific projects are what we hear on the campaign trail this year, where we're and identify problem spots and different things where we know we need those projects to be sped up and move forward that didn't make the cut on this last project. So look, we've spent 1.5 years looking at CIP, and this just makes it a little bit longer, but that extra bit, I think it's really important that we know what it's going to communicate that to the public. I'm okay with going ahead and doing the Southeast so that we're ready. I'd like for all those funds, I don't know, this is a legal question if we do the motion, I really would like that to be dedicated to TDOT partnerships, that 3.4% to be, again, and others might disagree, and that's fine. I think good people and reasonable logic could have a different view of this, but for me, making sure that 3.5 cents is 3.4 cents is dedicated to TDOT partner. Now it could be any TDOT partnership opportunity or improvements on TDOT roadways. For instance, if it's the Franklin Road fix Band-Aid that we're talking about doing, that would be eligible because it's on a TDOT roadway. In the meantime, or if we, there's no guarantees we'll get the other 25 million from TDOT next year. Mm-hmm. And we're collecting the funds from the citizens under the auspices of this is going to Mac-Hatcher Southeast, or now it's the CIP projects, and I want to have a little bit more definition. Mm-hmm. So I will probably make that motion but I'd like to hear what everyone else thinks about those. And then the last thing is on operations. I just move it back to 22.1 cents, which is equal to the one in option 1. Again, I know we're trying to get in round numbers, but if we can make it work in option 1 with 0.21 cents, then I think we can make it in this alternative option with 0.21 cents and keep it consistent. it won't be a nice round number, but if we can make it work before, we can make it work now. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Baggett. Alderman Barnhill.
I think that what we've heard so far has been two very good comments. I appreciate Alderman Berger mentioning parks and the fact that people are looking and saying, why do we put the tax rate, all of it, increased on roads or whatever? And I guess the roads would be to lead to the parks, which we're now neglecting because we've taken the money and put it all on the road. So I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So I do appreciate a lot of the things that Alderman Bagley has said. I would disagree with maybe one thing. The City Hall is 105 million. It's not 52 or 3.
Sticks and bricks.
Sticks and bricks. It's still $105 million. So it's not a matter of whether or not people like that or don't like it. I've made my opposition and mentioned it many, many times over the last 4 or 5 years, and not necessarily to the fact of whether we needed or did not need City Hall. But I don't think that City Hall is a comparison to whether we need a bridge over the interstate or whether we need Franklin Road improved from McHatcher to a Gateway Village, or whether we need, and I've said 2 or 3 times, at least 2 or 3 times, I'd like to see all of McHatcher completed, all of it. I think that, for me, that's more important than the widening of the southeast portion of McHatcher. But that's not what the state's saying. And what I guess the one big annoyance to me is if you go almost anywhere now, you will see a nice 4-lane divided highway, and you can go from Columbia to Lawrenceburg. You can go from Fayetteville to Shelbyville. You can go almost anywhere you want to go now, and the state has built a road somewhere that benefits one heck of a lot less people than it would benefit the Franklin area and the growth that we're having here. So, I don't know what the philosophy is, and I don't know what the thinking is, but I do know this: they're not necessarily putting the priorities where they need to be putting the priorities. And we say the same thing. It doesn't seem to move the needle any, but it does. Under what I've listened to as far as in the committees and what we've discussed, I probably will not. I will not support the 29-cent property tax rate. I will support 32. If and when we get to public hearing, if there's a reason from the public to come out and explain to us why they want 29 instead of 32, I mean, that's the option that they have. But I will support a 32, not necessarily a 29 tonight, for 2 reasons. Number one, it moves it to public hearing, and number 2, I think it funds for what we need, but I also think it funds for a anticipated state participation greater rate than what they're doing right now. So that's my thinking on the property tax rate and how we've done that. But I do think both of those comments, all of those comments, were comments that were well intended, well thought out, and directly to 8 items that are all in the budget related to the 32 versus the 29. One other thing I would say, when we say we have the lowest property tax rate in the state of Tennessee or whatever it is, we may have it. We also probably have the highest priced house in the state of Tennessee. So it's really not relevant that you have a low tax rate. It's relevant, as Bev has said, that the check that you write at the end of the year to pay those taxes. And so I don't normally refer to the tax rate as being the lowest. I know that we're paying a very high tax rate or a property tax rate against. What would be interesting is, I guess, to see some of the other. Well, I know we don't do it against the other counties, but we are very, very high value when you start a new home. Is the average selling price last year, I guess, was 1.1 million. That's a pretty good check that you're writing as far as the city's property tax. And I would assume that the county's probably going up too. So the citizens of Franklin will, and Williamson County one way, citizens of Franklin twice. They'll have a city property tax rate, but they'll also have a county property tax rate, which is going up. So I still will look at 32 and continue to look at this. So that's what, when I get ready to vote tonight at the voting session, I will vote on 32 cents per 100 of assessed value.
Alderman Caesar.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the comments from my colleagues here. I have a question, and perhaps this was covered in your original presentation, Eric, and I may have missed it. I know Alderman Barnhill just talked about it. Alderman Baggett spoke about the operations cost. Help me understand why it costs more to do operations if we're doing a smaller capital raise, or tax raise.
Well, the original request was to be closer to 3 cents, and we were trying to balance around the 32-cent component. So it's a small shift. We're lower than what we originally proposed when you got the budget before we knew the certified rate. So we're using it somewhat as a balancing number, but it's still lower than what we originally looked at for operational needs. So we've been reducing it. That first version you got, I think, had it around 2.9 cents. We brought it down to 2.5 in one scenario, 2.1 in the other, so that we stayed at or below the 32 cent in the one scenario and 29 in the other. So it's a bit of a balancing figure, but when we first looked at it without knowing the rate, but an estimate of the rate, we were closer to 2.9. So quite frankly, there are a lot of other needs identified. You use well over half of it in ongoing expenses in this year alone, and then you use the balance for capital, pay-as-you-go capital within the operating budget. You will convert that next year and probably the following year into ongoing personnel expenses. We know those are coming in terms of park staff, probably some other public works staff, in addition to, I think you'll also see some additional public safety staffing in that window as well.
And so thank you for the additional color, because I was interpreting operations as operational expenses, not
Yeah.
capital.
Yeah.
And I was
It's a
thinking-
little bit of rounding, quite frankly, to make the rate work within some logical confines, but it's something you can give us guidance on for sure.
Okay, appreciate that. And so in the future, we may see that number, theoretically, that number could be equivalent in both.
No, we're going to make commitment. Once you set this rate, we're going to stay in that same range.
Okay.
Operations will be where we have identified it in either of these rates that you choose, and the dedicated component to Invest Franklin 2.0 is what we have proposed here. It's kind of, let's set the rate, and then we have something to plan around on the operating side and the 10-year capital investment side.
Okay. And this may be outside of this proposal, but since I've been on the board, we've increased, or we will potentially this evening, increase water and sewer rates. And that's a mandatory increase for the residents of our city. We've increased solid waste rates. That was a mandatory increase that was almost $100 per resident per year when you add it up over the year. Mandatory, they don't have an option to opt out. I suppose there are support options for people who are older or retired or on fixed incomes. And if you are one of those people, I would encourage you to utilize that. It's not overly utilized, so please reach out there. We've increased impact fees and development fees. However, I think Alderman Berger referenced this. Those impact fees have been deferred. Is it 6 years that we deferred them until we begin collecting the enhanced impact fees?
No, you're doing it now. You're grandfathered in previously approved
Right.
rates, but new development is paying updated rates, and there is a phase in, but they are paying a portion of
percentage.
the phased in updated rates over time.
Yeah, and so this is not, I guess I raised those things to say that this is not the only increase that we're putting on people who are either doing business, building properties, or living in our city. And I say that because this is one of the heaviest things for me as an elected official, because I'm making decisions to reach into the wallets and into the budgets of people who live here and invest that money in a way that's meaningful and necessary. And so I don't take this lightly. And I also don't take the previous increases that we've put on the residents in just the 18 short months, 20 short months that I've been in this seat. I do think we need to consider some of these significant capital improvements. I think our city The game has shifted a little bit as the state has now decided that in order for a project that is needed in our community in order to supply our residents with a reasonable transit experience, the state has now required us to step up to the plate with a significant amount of money, $75 million just to do a portion of what we could have come to the table with $100 million to do all of it, or zero in years past. And so the game has shifted a little bit for us. And I do think these are needed projects. I'll be very interested to hear from residents, and as we discuss future items on tonight's meeting, how some of these operations budget expenses are going to be rolled out. But I do want to hear what the public says. I think, as one of my colleagues that sits right next to me has said in the past, part of leadership is seeing the vision and making tough decisions. And I want the residents to know that increasing taxes or fees is not something that I take lightly. And I often feel like increasing costs or taxes is the last solution. I do feel like our city staff has done a very good job of being diligent with the money we've raised in the past. And I think they've done a really good job of fighting for our community with the state of Tennessee to get Mac Hatcher put back on the docket so that we can see Mac Hatcher come out of the ground in the next decade before 2.0 is complete. So thank you, Eric, for putting this together. I think I will like to see this move forward so that we can get community feedback. I want the community to scrutinize the tax increase. I want them to ask questions, and I want their feedback so that we can make the right decision for our city so that we're prepared for the next decade. Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead, Alderman Baggett.
Unless Alderman, no. So we're just real quick on that because Alderman Caesar brought up some other increases. What I think the public and my fellow aldermen need to realize and remember is that since I was elected in 2021, we've had record inflation. And in fact, 38.5% cumulative inflation from 21 to 25. And if you think about all those things that you mentioned that were raised, most of those were not 38% or higher. Some of them probably could have been. And inflation has taken a massive toll on the city budget in reduced spending power, which is why we've seen record investments. What happens when inflation goes up in the economy? Wages have to follow. That's why you're seeing we spent the better part of 3.5 years working on pay studies, and we're looking at it again tonight. Because inflation has taken an absolute chunk. And if we don't make these changes, now granted, I'm wanting to do different than others have wanted to do, but a change is required because if we don't, guess what actually suffers? We could not have raised any of those things and all that money would come out of capital. And the projects that the roads and everything else has to be absorbed somewhere, and it would come out of capital. And I mean, effectively, that's where everything flows down. Your capital budget and your opportunity to build more roads and things, that's what suffers. Because you're going to continue to pay the people. We have to raise, pay to keep up with inflation, or else you lose good people. You're going to have to self-sufficiently fund sanitary or solid waste, because that's the policy that has to happen. You're going to have to, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, yes, there have been increases. It's not because it's been an ineffective operation or that government's been wasteful, and you weren't implying that. But I do think the public needs to know that this is not just look, we're now experiencing the effects of inflation, national inflation, and it's now hit our capital budget, and we can't do all the things we would really like to do. So that's the only point I'd make. I don't want this to feel like someone did come into your pocketbook, and it's the federal government who caused spending policy to raise inflation by record numbers. But anyway, I digress.
Alderman Berger.
One couple last points. What about if we didn't commit to that 3 cents, and then a year or two later we find out that Mac Hatcher is back in play in the Northwest? Can we not add it in then? We could certainly do it then. We can certainly say we can put that off, and if we know, then we can add it back in. That's a possibility of dedicating it to that. as far as City Hall goes, and so appreciate your comments, Clyde, really do. But, you know, I think we got down to the point where City Hall, we had one chance. It's a stationary building that's going to be there for a long, long time. And I hope people hundreds of years from now look at that building and go, well, it's still standing. And it's the seat of our government. And hopefully we got it right. It is a hefty price tag, though. It really is. But, you know, something else. With the state, we have to beat this home with the state, with our elected officials, but they're not alone in this because they have an entire legislature to deal with. But Franklin's one of the largest economic developers in the state. We bring in national and international headquarters. I remember the day I got elected, we were given the next week or so, and we got a notice that says be at the state. In 4 or 5 days, we're going to be at the state for a big announcement. That's when they announced Nissan coming in here. And ever since then, we've been bringing in national headquarters. We're a leader in the state in education and innovation as well. So we've always been one of the state's biggest players, since 2006, and we've continued to lead in the state in many, many ways. And the state needs to start recognizing that, because we're getting shortchanged on education. We're certainly getting shortchanged on roads. And if we're bringing these people in here and we're innovating and we're attractive, and of course the state is attractive because of the way we operate our state, and it's business friendly. But Franklin's doing a heck of a job for this state. And I think it's about time the state starts recognizing that when we bring these companies in here and these people follow, and then they start hiring our own people, and we put jobs together, they put jobs together for our people and grow this place, that they need to pony up and say, they're leading our state. They're bringing revenue into our state. They're making our state very healthy. We're the #1 fiscally responsible state in the nation. In order to do that, we have to have more investment from the state in education and in roads. I just want to go on record to say that. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
I did have one question on our voting session tonight. We're going to be considering the pay plan adjustments. And can you point out where the $1 million is coming from for those pay adjustments as far as the last slide you showed?
Sorry.
Sound like
No
a,
idea what happened. Always playing on my computer. There we go. That's freaky. You're touching it.
So the $1 million is built in across your operating budgets. It's reflected in what we put in the personnel costs in all funds where there are people assigned. So we've made those base assumptions across all the budgets with the adjustments that are necessary. It's not nearly the dramatic adjustment we had 3 years ago when we were doing a significant market catch-up, or even that we did last year when we did a important catch-up in the public safety realm. But we were able to integrate that in the budget that's before you. So it's in pretty much all the budgets that have personnel. It reflects what's needed to get people into the right updated pay grades.
it's built into this.
It is already built in,
That's
yes.
all I need to
But
know.
the rough cost of all of it collectively is $1 million across all funds, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
I do appreciate everybody's comments, and certainly there's a little bit more time to speak to other things if we want to. I'm not a huge fan of adding in, of accepting the 29-cent property rate and then adding it in. I think that if we're going to be nimble, we probably need to go ahead and do the entire amount now, would be my personal opinion. And, you know, as far as projects that need to be done, all I hear is infrastructure projects, and you know, I think the list could maybe be refined, and that's something that we'll do moving forward. I would remind you that those fees have gone up. We've grown 18,000 people since we did the last property tax increase. I look at it maybe a little differently than you. If you're not going to put the charge more on the solid waste collection fee, it's going to go somewhere else, property tax or some other fee and so on. I'm going to beat up on the state just a little bit, and I'm also going to be nice to them. Number one, we do have a funding problem for transportation, and we talk about that in all the meetings I'm in. But the state is working on it. In 2 years, they've put $4 billion into roads, and they've also just added the tire tax, which is another $80 million that will help some. But that's still not enough. And I think Alderman Baggett makes a good point about the amount of inflation that's occurred. The other thing, as far as the state, they have sent to MTAS for study, looking at ways that we could continue to increase on a predictable basis how we can continue to fund roads. I heard a couple of people say that the state's requiring, the state didn't require, we participated in a program and we elected to participate in that program. Unfortunately, that's where we're at to make things happen. And we're all disappointed that our offer was not accepted, but we'll continue to work on that. There's lots of moving parts going on right now. One of them are these P3 projects, and I think there's an unknown there as far as how much money the P3 is going to put in. And I think that's why they're holding some money still close to their vest that they may need, and hopefully that'll loosen up a little bit more moving forward. I think it's a great budget. I think it answers a lot of questions that people want. How are we going to fund all this infrastructure? This is how we're going to fund all the infrastructure, is fund it through property tax, and that's the most equitable way, it looks like to me. So that's my 2 cents. I have all other notes, but I won't go in them. So appreciate everybody's comments, and we'll continue to have that discussion. I look forward to the public's comments on what they want and want to see. I would not put a earmark on any money. I mean, we're the ones that vote. We're the ones that put the earmark on it, and I think to tag it, then we'd have to take the earmark off of it. I think we all know what we want to do with these extra funds if they come in. We know it needs to go to infrastructure, and we know that we need to focus it on southeast and also northwest. Huge demands. So, any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would just say I want to thank Michael Walters-Young for the job you do with our city administrator, because in our meetings that we all sat in, you're just stellar. And I'm thankful that we have you and your team of people that work with you. You all do such a great job, and you always explain things so well. And this is not an easy task at all. And it is very difficult to put budgets together, and all the teams from all the different departments that work so hard on that. And I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I might ask that you say that a lot louder because his mother is here tonight.
Michael's mom is here.
She is. Oh, goodness. Had no idea. Well, there you go.
Yes.
We really appreciate your son. And Eric, thank you too.
Thank you.
And your team.
My mom is not here.
Your mom is
We'll work on that, though.
We'll go to item 5, which is Resolution 2025-40 to adopt a position classification plan and pay plan for employees of the City of Franklin. Mr. Townsend is coming up with great
I
speed.
will. I'll kick that off with a few comments. This is a natural fit with the budget discussion we just had, because the most significant part of our budget, both in reality but also fiscally, is our people. That general fund budget is approximately 70% related to personnel costs. And we want to make sure we do that well. And this is about the regular update of the plan. So are we ready to roll? All
Ready
right.
to roll.
Great. So we are bringing to you an update of the classification and compensation plan. It was last comprehensively updated for the fiscal 23 budget, so 3 years ago in 2022. We have worked on that, and it has at its roots an update of the plan that happened probably over 12 years ago when we streamlined the entire compensation plan, went from 22 pay grades down to 15, and moved to something that was much more based on market data and targets within that market in terms of where we wanted to be competitively. Let's go ahead to the next slide. As you know, a year ago when we were formulating the current budget, the fiscal 25 budget, we made some adjustments to specifically move our public safety, police and fire compensation plan to a 90th percentile in the market compared to the market data. Previously, we'd been at 75th percentile, so we moved that up to that higher benchmark. We also separated out police and fire into a specific tailored set of pay grades for the sworn positions in police and fire. So what we are looking to do, and that was adopted really last spring leading into the fiscal 25 budget implementation. Some of that was implemented at the tail end of fiscal 24. So you look at that, and so what we're trying to do in this plan update is complete that compensation plan update and bring the rest of our city team into that same target of the 90th percentile. And so that's what we do, and that's what's proposed as part of this this presentation and is included and supported in the fiscal 26 budget. Want to introduce Steve Thompson. Stephen Thompson is part of our compensation consulting team. He's worked with us since 2013 in updating the plan. I want to give him a chance to talk a little bit in the next couple slides about some of the methodology and some of the things we look at in creating those benchmarks. So, Steve, take it away.
Okay, great. Well, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'll try to be brief. On slide number 5 here, let me back up. This is a market-based approach. All jobs are valued like they're valued in the marketplace. We have 2 sources of data, a set of public sector benchmarks, which is shown here, and then we also have data from the private sector. Many of the people who seek employment with the City of Franklin or seek employment elsewhere from the City of Franklin will as likely go to the private side, private industry, retail, distribution, manufacturing, construction, whatever, just as much as likely to go there as we would to government. So we have the public sector set of benchmarks, pretty much the same set of cities and counties we've used in the past. There's been some slight change over time, but if anything, it's probably become more Middle Tennessee centric, if you will. But those were deemed to be good benchmarks for Franklin, either because of proximity, you're in the same labor market, competing with for the same people. There's a few cities that are a bit further out that might be good benchmarks in terms of comparable demographics, et cetera. So that's the public sector, and then we also have the private sector data. We subscribe to a nationwide database. It's updated quarterly. There's upwards of 4,000 job titles in there, and we can match almost every city job to 1 or 2 job titles in that private sector database. The only exception being certified law enforcement and certified firefighters. Those are not in that database. Okay, take it away.
All right, so the question is, does Steve just come by and drop off the data? Here's what you need to pay your people? No. What we do is we make sure all the directors and ACAs have a chance to look at the job descriptions for their people. Fortunately, we just did this not that long ago, so most of the job descriptions were perfect. But there was some tweaking that needed to be done, and they tweaked it. Then after that, we sent Steve's preliminary job table out to the directors and ACAs, and we, of course, asked them to keep that confidential. But at that time, we asked them to look it over, see if you had any questions, get back out to us with questions, and knowing that we're also, we're capturing the questions in HR, we're going to bring Steve back and his team to talk to them. So then that's what we did. After we got the feedback and any questions that we could resolve with the directors and ACAs, we brought each director in, and the ACAs were welcome as well, to meet with Steve, his team, Eric, and myself, and we discussed if there are any nuances that Steve's team need to understand to make sure he's targeting the right compensation level.
Some of the key questions we ask are, what positions are you having trouble retaining or attracting? Are there things that seem incompatible across the organization in terms of the type of work that happens in one department versus others? And so we really do try to get it fixed where it needs to be, both use the data, but also what's the real experience been of department directors and their team in attracting and retaining the best talent. So they tell us where they're having the most challenges, and we always make sure that we're giving that maybe a little extra attention, make sure we're addressing that and looking at what the market tells us as well.
And with that, Steve and his team, they go back and they assess and they come back with another job table. And so let me tell you what those findings were. The compensation study showed that overall a 15% increase was necessary to bring the pay range. I have population on the slide, but really it's the pay range to the target position, which is at the top 10% or better compared to the market. Of course, for police and fire, Eric already told you, we had addressed that earlier, so they were only 4% low.
Those are adjustments to the pay ranges, not
Right.
across the board increases for individuals. This is adjusting the pay structure itself, not individual pay adjustments.
Correct. And then some additional findings of the city's 300 positions, 58 positions, which is 19%, increased one pay grade. No one had to go to two pay grade increases. And then 125 city team members, which is 17% of the full-time employees, had an increase of 1 grade. And then we capped the total increases of $15,000 for any individual, and that only affected 6 people.
So one other thing on this that isn't on the slide, but there are approximately 56 individuals across the city organization that were topped out, meaning they're at the very top of their existing pay range. These adjustments in modifying the pay ranges themselves will eliminate those folks from being topped out. They'll have a little more room to grow in their salary in this cycle and hopefully for several years to come.
That's correct. So currently only 2 people are in that boat. All right.
Can you clarify the difference between the first and second bullet? I'm a little confused on that.
Let me go backwards.
So there are multiple people in a position. So you have 58 positions that were impacted, but within that, there's 125 team members. So you may have 10 people in the same position, like there's 80 some firefighters. That's one position with that many individuals within it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I got it.
And as a point of comparison, when we did this 3 years ago, that number of team members impacted, I think that was somewhere around 79% had a pay range adjustment. And in this case, because have kept up better with the market, it's only 17% in this go around. Plus, we did adjust police and fire, which is a significant portion a year previous. So let me take you through just the process in terms of what we're going to do. The first step is to adopt the pay plan with those adjusted pay ranges. And as Kevin talked about, that's approximately a 15% adjustment to the ranges. Because we adjusted those ranges, the next step is to look at how folks are impacted. So if anybody that may have been in the lower end of that pay range, they may have fallen out of what the new updated pay range is. So we make sure everyone is properly placed within their pay range. That group of around 17% that had their pay range increased, they get a base adjustment of 3% because of the change in pay grades. So that all takes place in this next step. And then the third step is we do our general market increase that we do as part of our budget. In this case, it's 2.5%. The inflationary calculation that we've done recently that related to our folks in the pension program also applies here. That inflationary number is now down to about 2.4%. So this is approximately an inflationary adjustment at 2.5% for our team members. Everybody receives that. And then the next step is where we apply a component related to performance and merit. So there's an additional 0.5% up to 2.5% based on folks' performance in the performance evaluation system. So when you roll that together, a minimum of about a 3% increase up to a maximum of 5%, depending when you put steps 3 and 4 together, depending on folks' overall performance in the evaluation process. On average, typically, that's somewhere around 4.2% is what we've seen on average happening for folks in this structure. So one other just sort of element when we go through this process, folks that are hired more recently, if you're hired after July 1 of 2024, you would not have received an annual performance evaluation, so you're not eligible for that second component. Same is true if somebody hired after January 1, so they would receive just the market increase only. They wouldn't receive the merit-based. So that's just something that happens depending on timing when folks come on board and making sure we're holding true to giving some level of reward for folks in terms of how they performed in the previous year. So that really covers it. Mayor referenced it when we talked about it previously. Collectively, across all of our operating funds, implementation of this pay plan update is approximately $1 million. So quite frankly, that's less than I expected when we went into this. That speaks to the fact that we've worked to try to stay updated, and we're also doing this on a 3-year cycle. Last time, a lot of that was driven by COVID and disruptions in the labor market and getting good data. We went 5 years between updates in the last cycle. So doing this more regularly, and of course, we did police and fire on a 2-year last time and continue to monitor that. The separate pay grades within fire and police also help us keep a more direct eye on what the market's doing. I did share with you that we bumped up again our starting pay for police officers, both those coming in new that need full training and those that are lateral transfers that are already post-certified. We've bumped that up a little bit as well to make sure we're staying at the top of the range and very, very competitive in the region. So that's the presentation. We're glad to take any questions, clarification. We appreciate the great support that Steve and his team provides us, and the HR team does a great job digging in and working on this. Budget and performance team also is a critical part of reviewing this, understanding it, and folding it into the recommended budget. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Everybody good?
I've got a question for the consultant.
And maybe others will find interesting. I mean, Kevin, you can, you have everybody. But while we've got you here,
Sure.
compression. We hear this a lot from the board member and alderman. And have you ever had a pay study that did not have compression?
No, and we did discuss that with the City of Franklin team here. I think Eric and Kevin kind of view this as a 2-phase approach. So this first approach is what we're talking about today. We're going to get all the pay ranges moved up to the 90th percentile, adjust pay so that everybody's pay rate is at least above the minimum of these new ranges, and then apply the general increase 2.5% plus the merit. That's probably, we could consider that for phase 1. Phase 2 would be addressing what you're talking about, the pay compression, because this study does not really address that to a great extent. There's a little bit, some adjustments, but not many. So as we did a few years ago, I think there was a pretty concerted attempt to look at time in job, and I think secondarily time with the city, and adjust pay so that a person's position in the pay range more appropriately reflected the time in job.
I liked that. And this, just so y'all know, is not specifically related to necessarily the numbers that I saw. Mm-hmm. But we hear, this comes
It always
up.
happens some, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just curious. Also, do you think that are you seeing other municipalities take the kinds of approaches we've had to take over the last 4 years, 3 years? I mean, is this, or have we gone above and beyond? I mean, I guess kind of give us a little bit of framework of, I feel like we've done a lot. Yeah. And we've been really active and assertive on this. But is that your perception when you look at other places?
Yeah, we do a lot of, 100% of our work is city and county government, a large part of that Middle Tennessee, but we go as far east as Kingsport and as far west as Germantown and Shelby County. So, but and everywhere we go, it's kind of, we have to do something to keep up with Brentwood and Franklin. So, so yes, I think others are trying to, Franklin and Brentwood and some of those cities have tried to, Germantown a little bit, have tried to be ahead of the pack to attract and retain the best. And other cities, counties have found that they are losing folks or can't compete or whatever for various reasons, some of which are not pay related. But
Right.
so as you're moving to the 90th percentile, we do have a couple clients right now that are moving off the 50th percentile up to the 60th or
Right.
65th. Nobody's going to the 90th, but there are, we're all fighting for the same people. It's very competitive in Middle Tennessee, especially given all the development, construction, et cetera, that's going on. So, yeah, pay compression is an issue with everybody. Law enforcement, firefighters to a certain extent, but law enforcement attracting EMS, real big challenge.
Thank you.
And we will continue to look at that. It is always kind of a step two is to look at compression and impact. We quite frankly saw less concern around that when we implemented the public safety changes a year ago. So I'm encouraged by that, but we keep looking at it, and it's always a topic of concern, and you try to make sure you're doing the best you can by it, but also, we do reward for performance, and we don't want to always be adjusting
Right.
it back to just how long you've been here. So it's striking the right balance on both identifying and being market-based, but also identifying and moving people through that pay grade quicker that perform better. So because we want to show that is acknowledged, supported, and that we show our appreciation directly in how the pay structure is done. So it's an art as well as a science, and we work hard to do it, and we'll be looking at compression concerns. I really rely on department directors to help us identify where that's at and where we need to work on that. And sometimes it's a broader solution, sometimes it's more targeted. It's usually a combination of both.
Thank you.
Ready to keep moving? Alderman Caesar?
Questions
Sure.
and lest the people viewing at home not appreciate the fact that this isn't the only time we adjust payment for salary, pay rates, or payment for work that's being done for our city employees. They're getting, what are they eligible for, and what are they likely to receive on an annual basis?
So you're talking about outside of this compensation?
If I'm an employee for you, and I work in the HR department, what am I eligible for annually as far as pay raise or bonus, et cetera?
Very good. So annually, we have the cost of living put in there, and so we do that annually. It could be as much as 2.5% this year, 0.5% since we've made the adjustments. And then plus that, you have the merit component, which again is 0.5 to 2.5.
Okay.
So this year, the baseline cost of living was 2.5%. And last year, I think we did 3% because inflation was higher. So we look at what the inflationary is tracking on. Everybody gets that as a base, and then the next component is based on performance.
Merit. So
Merit
and does
based.
merit scale based on whether you go, is it a 5% maximum?
Maximum capped at 5% in this case. So somewhere between 3 and 5% based on performance.
Okay. And I've built compensation plans before, and I understand how complicated they are. So thank you for doing the work here. You're never going to satisfy everyone. I'm more concerned as I think about us trying to get to the 90th percentile. There's two questions that stick out for me. This may not make me super popular, but why 90%? And we're hearing that we're already at the top of the pay grade. Why are we shooting to go even higher? Again, we're asking the citizens in our community to support this, and they probably need to understand why we're offering to pay people more, or why we're being asked to consider paying people more. And then the second piece, and not that I won't support it, I just think that's an important piece of information to get into the public discussion. And then the second piece is around the minute details without dispelling any individual or any department. When I shouldn't speak for the board, but when I made the decision to support the increase for police and for fire, it wasn't just because we felt that they needed an increase. We were experiencing significant market pressures on hiring new firefighters and new police officers.
And retaining.
And I guess that's the question. Talk to me about scenarios in other departments where we're seeing significant pressures that are they're being faced with on retention and new recruitments.
Yeah, let me address that. couple different things specifically. We consistently see the need to go higher in the pay range when we hire folks. So our generally give department.
Can I interrupt just
Yeah.
1 second? I'm not suggesting we go for value buys on
No,
employees
got it,
because I think our right. but
Understood.
I think
Understood.
our community, well, and I think our community appreciates and expects a very high level of service. Much
Yes.
like when we talked earlier about the sanitation, like we could have not raised that fee, but we would have had to reduce services.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true when you look at personnel and
Exactly.
what we're asking of our personnel to deliver excellence. We can't expect to get excellence if we're not going to pay at an exceptional rate.
Yes.
But help me understand the gap that
Sure.
we're facing that justifies the increase.
Yeah, there are a couple things I would highlight for you. Like I said, we consistently see, and I give department directors latitude to hire within the first quartile of the pay range, so that 25% range. I am more and more seeing folks coming to me and saying, I need to go above that. I need to go closer to midpoint because that's what it takes to get the people we need, both in terms of just bringing in both the best candidate, the best fit for the job, and just what the market is demanding out there. So that's one piece, and we see that pretty consistently. We've also see just the broader context of a city with a 2.4% unemployment rate, the lowest in the state, a county with a pretty similar rate, just slightly higher, somewhere in the 2.6 range, something like that. So it is really tough. And more of our people have to travel farther and farther to come to work for us. So we have to be more competitive to make that worth their while. And so that's one component. We also don't just focus on pay. We try to focus on support, professional development, a strong, supportive, positive work culture. All those are things that you think about that make it the place people want to work. We've seen some really good payoffs in the last 2 years. Our employee turnover has reduced 30% in the last 2 years. It's still maybe not quite where we want it, but it was at 10%, it's now down to 7%. So that's something that shows we're making progress, but we still can do better. We also look at the number of applicants we get per available position. That has increased significantly in that 2-year window as well. And that speaks to being more competitive on the pay side, but also being a place that people say, well, I think that's a good place to work. I'd like to go there. I feel like I'd be valued. They do good work. They, do things that will develop their people professionally. So it's all of those pieces that fit together. We're talking about the pay piece. It's a really, really important piece, but it's not the only piece. But those are the things we look at. When we look at the market, we do want to be ahead of the game in terms of being highly competitive. And it varies a little bit, and Steve may be able to speak to it. 75th percentile versus 90th percentile. Some positions, that's a bigger leap than others. It just depends on what's going on with that individual position. But it does put us in that highly competitive place. It's a judgment call. Quite frankly, I feel like if we said that judgment and that value is right for public safety, it should be right for everybody that works for us. If we think we want to be that employer of choice and that's the place we want to be in the market, we ought to do that for all positions, not just public safety. That's just my personal belief and why I felt that was important to move forward, and not just say this one group should be higher in the market than another. I think we ought to say that for everybody. That's a judgment call I've made, and I think HR has made in looking at this collectively, and that's why we've recommended it this way. Kevin, I don't know if you want to add.
Sure, let's add one point here. And also, first off, I hope you caught the correction. I think I said 0.5, it's 2.5, it's on slide 10 for the market adjustment. And then the merit is 0.5 to 2.5 for merit. But back to what Eric was saying, we're not just in competition against these other cities that choose to go for the 50th or 60th percentile. Sometimes we could lose people to the private sector. So we need to target at the 90th percentile to keep the great employees that we have, because that's also a place they can go, leave public sector.
And one of the things we do, we look at compensation every budget. We just do it comprehensively every 3 years or so. We have had to make adjustments every year to something. because the market changes. You know, we did police and fire significantly last year. There's other times we've had to make adjustments in IT or engineering because we've seen the market move. So we try to stay attuned to it. And this is doing it comprehensively every 3 years, but we try to stay attuned very closely so that we remain in that position and react to where we're struggling when we are.
I feel like I'm almost required to make this statement. I hope it's not just a statement to be said. This is in no way, shape, or form a reflection on the work that our city employees are doing. I think it's as a good due diligence question, so the people out there who we're going to be essentially passing this increase along to, they need to appreciate the work, the hard work that you guys do every day, and they need to appreciate also the fact that there's other places out there that you could go if we don't make proactive statements and proactive decisions to retain you and to empower you to go out and select the best next person to come into the City of Franklin team. So thanks, Kevin and Eric, for the additional explanation there and for setting the bar as high as you have, because I will say this, having worked in the private sector for a little bit, compensation is a piece. But there are a lot of places you couldn't pay me 190th percentile to go work. So thank you for making, not only you, Eric, but the team that leads our city employees for being intentional about making this a place that, in addition to compensation, the other elements of the day-to-day job are pleasant and keep people.
Thank you.
Ready to move on? Okay, item 6 is consideration procurement award to Urgent Team Management LLC of Nashville, Tennessee, in the total estimated amount of $359,610 for near-site clinic healthcare services for the Human Resource Department for a term of award. Any questions about that one?
Yeah, same current provider.
Yes.
Item 7 is City of Franklin Contract 2025-10166 with Gresham Smith Partners for the water line relocation design for the Franklin Road Bridge replacement over the Harpeth River in the amount of $75,120. Any question about that one?
I got one on this, but it's Paul gone. That's all right. Someone relay this,
Yeah.
Vernon maybe, or someone, or Eric, relay this, that I'm concerned with some of the right-of-way on that bridge replacement.
Okay.
And a constituent reached out, not related to this water line, but it is, because this Franklin Road bridge replacement, we need to make sure that y'all are working with the infrastructure in the right place, and there's a private business there that has some concerns with how that, everything goes in that right-of-way.
Okay.
So,
Which
we'll talk
business is that?
offline, but
Not gonna write it down?
nope, I'll talk offline.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep moving. Item number 8 is Amendment 5, City of Franklin Contract 2020-0012 with Hazen and Sawyer for a no-cost and modifications for the Southeast wastewater capacity evaluation. Everybody good? Item 9 is Amendment 2 to the City of Franklin Contract 2019-0122 with SSCH Franklin LLC for Parkland Impact Fee and Construction Agreement for REM PUD.
They've just adjusted the dwelling unit count, right? They've
Yes.
adjusted it down.
Correct. It's just a decrease in the dwelling count.
Item 10 is a presentation of artificial intelligence for the government.
Just not any government, but the city of Franklin. We'll have our team come forward. We had a group go to a conference and do some additional research around how you apply artificial intelligence effectively, appropriately in the context of local government. And so we know it's a new tool that you see in many, many aspects of life, but we want to look at how it can best be used to leverage our team, support our team, serve the community well, and what are the appropriate guardrails to have in place. So this will ultimately be an administrative policy, but I wanted to share with you how we plan to use it and get your feedback. And then also any guidance in terms of what you might want to see in the future as this tool continues to evolve. It's probably the type of thing that we'll be adapting and modifying this policy on a pretty regular basis, just as the technology and the applications evolve. So Jason Potts, our IT director, is going to lead the way, but we have a team of folks that have dug into this topic and provided some really good guidance. And we wanted to share with you our draft policy at this stage, get some feedback, and talk about how we move forward. So, Jason, take it away.
Thank you, Eric. Board, Mayor, good to be here with you this evening. I'll start with when we present our budget and to Budget and Finance Committee, we touched on AI and some of the things that we were looking at doing, and we had a lot of questions. I know Patrick was on that committee, as well as Alderman Potts. So it started actually with Eric. He was at a city conference, and there's an AI coalition team. This AI coalition, if you want to go to the next slide, it's a government AI coalition founded in the city of San Jose, Santa Clara County, California. So a group of us from the city went. So a few from IT, myself, and Andrew Southern, which is our IS development manager here at Franklin. So anything that works with integration, programming, coding, this is the guy that does it for us. So he went along with our assistant director, Brandy Arnett, our city attorney went, and also our HR director, Kevin, went. So we're sort of tag teaming it, because it's not just about the technology, it's about using it in a responsible and efficient way, because it is so powerful with what's going on in the world today. So the coalition represents more than 150 local, state, and governments that serve more than 100 million Americans. And I'm not going to read through this, directly, but the coalition's mission is to promote the responsible use in the public sector, ensuring governments have a voice in how AI is developed, implemented, and governed. Going to the next one, and I'll talk about just a little bit about the technology piece. It's so much more than just the technology. It's the people piece. It's the governance piece, and also, how we use it and what we use it for. So, not to read down through it, but analysis and learning, the model grows and sort of learns over time. Sort of the platforms that we work with today that we have in place. If you've heard of them, I'm sure some of you, the business owners, have. ChatGPT, Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, and then there's a ton of agents that run underneath that. It's a tool. That's all it is. But it's some really efficient ways for us to sort of increase capacity, but we have to be responsible in how we do that. So something that they implement are really, really stressed at this conference is having a policy. Why? It's having a policy for governance and decrease harms or bad things from happening, especially with the way that AI can be used in bad ways. It's no different. There's a lot of good things that it can do, and we're using those today. So some of the clear or the key objectives, clear guidance for staff and vendors, and then the vendors use a lot of our data as well. So we want to make sure that our data is getting used in correct ways. Define roles and responsibilities on who does what with the policy. And then you've got the risk part. Kevin will touch on that here in just a second. And then also establish processes for decommissioning AI systems that we no longer use. So the partnership piece, I'll let Kevin can jump in. Shauna's going to talk on a few slides about the contract and the legal piece. And then Andrew is going to speak to you a little bit about use cases and things like that. And then we'll have a time at the end for questions if you have any.
You're probably wondering, why is Kevin up here to talk about technology? That's the same question I had when Jason said, Kevin, I need you to be part of this group. And I thought, oh, I get it. They're going to come up with a lot of language, and you need to put it into HR language, put it in a manual, then present to the team members and say, this is what the new rules are. That wasn't it. And then I thought, oh, okay, because the risk management function of my job, as he says, there are some guardrails. If people step outside the lines, we're going to have problems with AI. That's why they had me there. No, that's not it. What I found out by going to that coalition is that I now am an AI evangelist, meaning I understand that how we can use it is to make our employees do better work, be more productive. It's not to replace employees, which is what I hear from people when oh, that's awful, it's a bad thing, it's to replace your employees. No, it's to make our work product better. And I understood that once I understood what AI was. I was a guy who a year ago could not spell AI. Now I'm a guy who can tell you that with the proper tools, it can make your emails better, your memos better, everything better. Now, and I don't want to touch too much on what Sean is going to talk about, but there are some guardrails, meaning if you just go into it and you don't understand the fact that what you put out there is no longer your property and anyone else can access it, you've gone too far. So meaning, if you just use the simple free versions of a lot of the AI devices, when you do that, that's fine. You'll have the product that you want, but now you're putting your information out there for the whole world to see. If you put your likeness in there, that's out there for everyone. Again, I won't talk too much about what Sean is going to talk about, but what we found out is it's not a bad thing. There are some bad things that can occur if we don't teach our employees how to use it correctly. One thing that was found early on when people started using generative AI is they put in a prompt. It tells AI, this is what I want a memo on. This is what my email about. It spits it out right away to you. And if you just have that and you turn it in, that's going to get you in trouble because that's not what we need you to do. We need you to, one, be successful at putting in great prompts. Two, to be successful at editing it, looking at what it says. Not everything AI generates is factual. And that's not a flaw. That's the whole part of what AI is it gathers data from all over and it creates the story you wanted them to create. However, if there's a gap, that's when we were taught that it intentionally will fill in the gap. That's what it does. And it'll learn and get better and it won't have the gap of something wrong. Here's an example. I put in my own prompt was do a bio on Kevin Townsend. Had everything right, school board, all that stuff right. At the very end, it says he attended Vanderbilt Law School. Did not go to Vanderbilt Law School. I have nothing. I don't know what in the world why they would have pulled Vanderbilt. And of course, it's not my job to figure it out, but it's my job to read it and say, oh my gosh, maybe it's because they know I'm a Nashville person, Middle Tennessee. They think, all right, what's the law school? It's either Nashville School of Law or Vanderbilt. Maybe that's it. So the point is, we may need to make sure our employees know it's not bad if you use it responsibly, edit what you put in there, and you'll get better at your job. We're not here to replace you. And you show your worth by putting in the appropriate prompts and then editing the document that comes out. So that's what I think is my biggest role here. And then also, yes, Jason did touch on it. We also have to have policy that we put it in the HR manual or put somewhere to make sure our employees know that this policy changes. What we found out when we were out there is, unlike most policies, this will change at least every 6 months. That's not something I'm used to in my world. I think you change an HR manual maybe once a year, you're good. This, once a year is not going to get it. And we have found that out as we had a policy that we thought was phenomenal, and it was, because we got it right from the coalition. Well, then as things changed, as the AI tools changed, we realized we need to change this so our police officers could possibly use it. So that's my role, is make sure you understand that and make sure the employees understand it's not a bad thing, it's a great thing. If you use it well, it's going to really make you do a better job. If you use it poorly, it causes big problems. And if you use it recklessly, you're putting your information, not private, but confidential information out there on the web that we don't want out there. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm so glad I'm part of this. I'm so into my role is making sure the employees know this is not here to replace you, it's here to make you better.
I also questioned why I was going. because I'm a lawyer and I didn't really understand. And then I thought, well, I'm clearly going to help create a policy for the employees of the city, which is in part why I was there. And there are a lot of things to consider when we're thinking about employees using AI. Obviously, one thing that we do a lot is draft memos about employees. Maybe it's a HIPAA-related matter or something like that. There have to be rules about what you can and can't put into your AI, and anything that is confidential can't be put in there, because everything we put in there goes out of our realm. One thing I learned, which I didn't know before, if you upload a photo to Photoshop and you mess around with it, you have given Microsoft access to that photo forever. Like, they have it now because you've uploaded it. And I didn't realize that that was in the fine print. And I'm sure people do that all the time and don't even think about it. So kind of thinking through employees and how they were using it was really important. In the law world, I just looked at this up today. There are 120 legal cases where AI was used in some sort of legal filing and it was wrong. 100% wrong. And these are big name law firms who are using it and screwing it up. And I kind of think, this is my opinion on it, every year every state does what's called mock trial, and lawyers from state bars create cases. They use fictitious people, a fictitious problem, and fake cases. And I think that AI is picking that up because it's all wrong, 100% wrong. For lawyers, that means sanctions. That means, like, you know, financial fines and maybe even like suspension of your license. That's very serious for us. A lot of our employees thankfully won't have that kind of negative impact, but you do have to think about how you use it. And then, but the next part about vendors, if we'll skip to the next one. This is what shocked me about why I was there. I was sitting in a room in a conference, like I think it was the first day, and one of our main vendors stood up with a question and said, every time I get information from a government client, I put that information into my chatbot, and it tells me, it produces a report that I send to the government when they for things that they've asked for. And I was like, wait, that's our data that they're sending out, and we have no control over it. We didn't even know about it. And that was a problem. Thankfully, this AI coalition has a lot of great templates and language that you can put into your existing contracts and new contracts about when they use AI on our behalf and who owns it and where it goes. And this is really, really important for us to make sure we're keeping a close understanding of our data. While we were there, we learned about Peloton, and this is an interesting case. Peloton, you know what Peloton is, you work out. They wanted to know how many people work out at certain times, which classes do they take, how long are they working out, and just data. And so they hired a third party to give them a report. That third party took all that information and put it in a chatbot, and the chatbot sent them a report. And then whatever the chat was, they sold the information from all the users. They got username, user data, and then they started emailing the Peloton users asking, about workout clothes and workout this and workout that. And so there's a class action lawsuit because Peloton didn't keep a good handle on their data when they sent it out to a third party to do a report. And we got to be real careful about that. Most of our stuff is public, but not all of it. I mean, user water rates and those kind of things can be confidential, so we've got to make sure we're really protecting our things. So we've already implemented some language into our contracts. We've worked on standard language about AI information, and we'll keep doing that. Again, it's changing every day, so we have to watch it pretty closely.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrew Southern. I'm an information systems developer here for the city. My role typically involves the development of software and web applications for different kind of business uses, business problems, and also other types of integrations. With the kind of dramatic rise of generative AI and its different kind of uses here in local government, I've been asked to kind of, fill in or fill this role as chief AIO with the city and kind of, helping our organization really navigate this time period where it's a really exciting time period as far as the technology that's involved. But we do have to, as Shauna and Kevin and Jason have all mentioned, we need to do it the responsible way. So this is a few just use cases that I've discovered. Jason, if you want to go. The first use case that I have, I wanted to start with with chatbots because chatbots are the most widely adopted use of AI for state and local governments. The city of Franklin, we have Frankie that we rolled out a couple months ago. A couple things that I found to be very interesting about some of the data that's coming in from Frankie is the different types of languages that are involved that are coming in from users. English, Spanish, you might expect to see those. German, okay. But then we get to Indonesian, I found that to be very interesting, and Malaysian as well. These are different languages that are coming into our chatbot and highlights the usefulness and the kind of importance of having this type of technology available for our citizens, because these are maybe languages or people that may otherwise not feel comfortable reaching out, or they may not be able to, and having this type of technology with these chatbots like Frankie allows for a more inclusive Franklin, and I think it's been a really good success so far. Some of the things that another use case for AI I found in the city of Los Angeles for plan review. So this is something that started initially back in 2022. What they're using AI for is for basic or initial kind of plan reviews. A developer may submit plans, and traditionally those initial plans would be reviewed. And if there was an issue with the plan itself, it was sent back to the developer. They had to make the changes necessary and then resubmit. And that process may take longer than it needed to take. With AI, City of Los Angeles is using AI to basically do those kind of initial plan reviews. They're automating those initial plan reviews. So a developer can submit, and if it's an obvious error for something, for instance, like building height, it just automatically kicks it back, and it doesn't, the developer doesn't have to wait for that process, and really just makes the process more efficient. And something that I found due to the wildfires, or in Pacific Palisades and Malibu, they're really ramping up this use of AI to try to facilitate the rebuilding of this area that's suffered this catastrophic loss. And you can imagine what the review process would be like for plans as they're coming in just the traditional way. So if you can use technology like AI to expedite that process, I think it's great. And that's something that they're doing in Los Angeles, and are rolling out also this technology to other cities in the state of California as well. Another use case for AI that I found is for 911 dispatch. Chatbots are being used, for instance, in the city of San Jose for non-emergency phone calls to 911, so that the AI is able to take that workload off of dispatchers or live dispatchers who need to be assisting people for emergency purposes, and really can help kind of make their job a little bit easier as far as kind of being able to better help the people that really need help. Dispatching is a stressful position, it's a stressful job, and it's something that I think all of us as citizens would appreciate if there's any way of kind of making their life easier and making it more efficient for them to do their job as far as responding to emergencies. I think it's a great thing. City of San Jose is, we were out there for the conference. They're really kind of leading the charge as far as how AI is being used in government, and this is an example of that. And they even did a demo while we were there on stage. Called the number and went through that process with the audience, and it was really interesting to see. Some of the statistics: 25% reduction in wait times, You can go ahead and go to the next one. Another use case that I found was AI for HVAC efficiency. The city of Stockholm, Sweden, has been using AI to manage HVAC levels at different colleges and universities across the country, or across, I guess, the city of Stockholm. AI is able to take weather forecasts and other sensor data coming from sensors to adjust the levels and just kind of drive efficiency. Says eliminating or reducing emissions by 8 to 19% by 2050, and also an 8% decrease in electricity usage from systems like this being in place. And the return on these types of implementations have been found within the first 2 to 3 years. So I think there's a lot of really awesome use cases for AI in local government. We're really just getting started in some respects, as far as generative AI. This AI has been around as a technology for a long time. I mean, as far as stuff like push alerts, kind of machine learning and those kinds of things. But as far as this type of generative AI, we're really just in the beginning, and I think there's a lot of exciting things to come as the technology progresses and as we as an organization really learn how to utilize it.
As we move into questions, I just want to highlight the 8 kind of key principles that are described in the policy. I just think that's important, that it's human-centered design, so it's focused on serving the public and supporting our team. There's security and safety are a primary focus. Privacy and the protection of privacy is a key component. Transparency, how and where it's used. Impartiality, there's fairness in how we use it and how it guides our work and our service to the community. Accountability about how it's used, where it's used, what it delivers. Effectiveness, that we're looking at it as a reliable, precise improver of how we provide our services, and that it empowers our team to serve better, use their time and resources in the greatest area of value, and maybe streamline some processes so our team can do more value-added work. So I think having those 8 key components in mind really is important in shaping what we do and how we do it. And I think I wanted that to be in your mind as we think about how we use this. So I want to thank the team. Jason's kind of helped lead it, but you see it's a multi-dimensional team, and everybody has contributed, and we continue to build out what this will look like for us. It is changing how people work, how they interact, and we want to make sure we're learning that and applying the best lessons to serve the best way we can. So thank you to the team for presenting this and for their work, and we're glad to take any questions you have.
Yeah, any questions? And I will add too, on top of what Eric finished with, we do have an internal AI committee that consists of the group that spoke, along with a few other staff members of the organization. So it's something that we're constantly, looking at, meeting on, and making sure that we're using it in the most responsible means that we can.
Any questions?
Yes, I do have a comment. Sorry, I know it's just right up my alley. So I think it's great. We've got to do it. Data protection is essential. I would challenge you to look at how, I think from our perspective, yes, operational efficiency is important. But there's been many times where I've thought, well, how can AI help the citizenry? Mm-hmm. And you think about all of our meeting minutes and our civic clerk. And civic clerk is better than what is out there in a lot of governments, don't get me wrong. It's great, actually. We're far advanced than most local governments. But to go back and find minutes or go back and find an item in the agenda, and this is stuff that's already public, by the way. Right? This is not private data. But I know for certain that just the stuff that we have that's already out there in the public on our website, being able to tap into that and say, well, what's the status of the project? Sally or Joe wants to figure out what's going on with that development or this or that street project. that would be able to give them an updated, at least a direction to point them easier to the information. And I think the citizens would appreciate it. Quite frankly, I would appreciate it. And I think a lot of us would, because how many times have you had to go back through to try and find it, or email a staff person to find out the most recent copy of this or that? And so I think those are huge. Let's think about how citizens can use it. Non-emergency 911, I don't know that we need to start with that one, but I appreciate that that's what some people are using it for. I think that's kind of, you got to wade into this, and that might not be the first place I would wade in, but I would just encourage you, like that low-hanging fruit that's already public data on our website. And Frank doesn't get to it. I've already tried. Frankie or whatever. Frankie can't get to it because I've tried to get Frankie to get me to summarize a meeting minute or this or that. Like Frankie's blocked off. And Frankie needs to open Frankie up. Let him fly. Open Frankie up to all those meeting agendas and minutes, and or civic clerk
That's
might
a
not let
civic
us.
clerk access, but that's something to look at.
Yeah, but I mean, and then maybe they want to charge us for something to do it. I'm sure they do, like anybody would. But that's where we got to go with this, because the public, the more information they know, the more we can provide the public with direct and accurate information, the easier accessible it is. It's a better situation for everybody. Public data first.
Yep.
Alderman Berger.
Right. Well, I was taking all sorts of notes as you were talking, because I've been doing a lot of reading on this lately, actually last 6 months. And I think this is great that we're really going to look into this a lot more. Training for everybody is non-negotiable in my book. Every employee has to be trained. It's going to be on a computer. It's going to touch AI, because, Shauna, you're absolutely right. One of the things I know when I use AI, and I always, if I'm writing something, because I like to write, so I'll write, and then I'll put it in there and go, help me with this section, or do, certain things that I tell it to do. And the more you explain it, the scenario, the better feedback they give you. But to put a name in there, if I'm writing something, I never put a name in there, never put an address in there, never put any identification of myself or anybody, because of some of the seminars that I've taken on AI have taught me all that. And I have to use it sometimes with clients. So I have to be, I've had to sign waivers even in some of these things. So I've learned a lot of things that I didn't know a year ago. And it's really important that we train everyone. Our approach could be tailored to department needs, but I'd like to also know, how do we measure success and all of that, because I think that's one of the things we'll have to do eventually. Will we use this citywide or just by certain departments? That's another thing. You don't need to answer all this stuff. It's the things I'm thinking about as you were talking. I wrote down oversight of the application and the use of the data. Oversight of the data, the application as a whole. Of course, maintaining the human element. Touch is critical for our success as a government. So, yeah, you have to put that in there. It has to be you, and you has to say what you want it to say. Guardrails, we have to put guardrails in place that make sure that, number one, AI is safe. The privacy, the intellectual property is another thing. I'm sure you talked about that in your seminar. Intellectual property, security concerns, and how we implement those things. I'd be curious what you've learned about GPT 4.0. That's Omni, I think they call it Omni, O-M-I-N-I. It's a new model, and it's the ability for auto, text, visual data, I think, and another one, how that's all handled together. And then the generative AI with the chatbots deliver, that would help us deliver consistent services and services that we're looking for. And then faster citizen services, high productivity, I would think, and how we make proactive decisions in making long-term planning for our city. I think that is really helpful too. But generative AI, I think could possibly help with the workload, ease of the workload, improve our city services, and actually too understanding languages. That might be also something there. But I'd like to look into the GPT, the Omni, the 4.0 thing, and the generative part in there. Just some comments I wrote down as you were talking. Interesting.
Okay, thanks. We'll definitely do that.
Seeing no further comments, thanks for the great presentation. We're adjourned. See you at 7 o'clock.